Looks like some of you guys started grinching a bit early. What is up, guys, and welcome to my review of the newest Christmas blockbuster film, Red One. It stars The Rock, it stars Chris Evans, it stars J.K. Simmons. Basically, anybody that has starred in a superhero film in the last 10 years finds a spot in this film. Now, this is a movie that has strangely been in the movie space discussion for quite a while. There was all this controversy with The Rock showing up to set late, reportedly, and pissing in bottles, and then there was reports about how massive the budget of this movie was, and then Amazon trying to push it into theaters to circumvent some of that financial burden, and then a lot of reports here lately about it probably not going to do very well in theaters, and a lot of people, admittedly, even myself included, just expecting this thing to be an absolute dumpster fire. The basic premise of this film is you have J.K. Simmons that's playing Santa Claus, and he gets kidnapped, and so you have The Rock, who is like his lead elf, that enlists the help of Chris Evans, who is somebody on the naughty list, to do this globe-trotting adventure to try to find and save Santa Claus before Christmas Eve. And a lot of people looked at that plot and said, that sounds stupid, that sounds ridiculous, I don't want to see any more movies from The Rock like this, it looks overly produced and CGI spectacle, and I'm sick of those movies. That was pretty much the narrative. And over the last couple of days, if you've seen any of the reviews that have come out, either in early reviews or people that saw them on opening night, most of the reviews are pretty bad. This is a film that is not getting treated very kindly. And while I understand and agree with a number of the issues that a lot of people have, I gotta be honest, I feel like you guys are being too harsh on this one. But really quick, before we dive into all my thoughts on Red One, while all of us are going to be busy preparing for the holiday season, you can alleviate some of that busy holiday stress by using pre-portioned and pre-packed meals by the sponsor of today's video, Factor. Well, the holidays are approaching and things are getting busy yet again. Come to think of it, are things ever not busy? With planning vacations, Black Friday and Christmas shopping, and even coordinating with loved ones about reunions and get-togethers, it is very easy to lose track of time and lose track of the ability to prepare meals for yourself or your family. Well, Factor Meals makes all of that easier with their delicious ready-to-eat meals that are chef-curated and ready to eat in 2 minutes. And there's many choices available for which meals you would like, such as Keto, Calorie Smart, and Protein Plus. Factor's ready-to-eat meals let you take all of the stress out of eating by letting you skip the grocery store, the prep, and especially the cleanup, and enjoy chef-curated and dietitian-approved meals that are delivered right to your door. With over 34 different meals, there's a variety of weekly options that will never allow you to fall victim to food fatigue. Plus, you can round out your meal and replenish your snack supply with over 55 different add-ons, such as apple cinnamon pancakes or fruit smoothies. So head to factor75.com or click the link in the video description below and use code 50CodyLeach to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50CodyLeach at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. And thank you so much to Factor for sponsoring today's video. Starting off with the positives for Red One. I actually think this is a fun premise. You know, Christmas movies, especially the ones that dive more into the more fantastical side of Christmas, where you actually have the magic of Santa Claus and reindeers and elves and everything involved, inherently the plots of those movies can be very silly if you look at them for any shred of seriousness. But if you take kind of more the action blockbuster approach to something like a Jingle All the Way or the Santa Claus, this is what you get. A movie about Santa Claus having to be saved by two Avengers, basically, or one Avenger and one wannabe Justice League member. That's a fun premise. For a family film, for a movie that is geared much more towards the kids than it is adults, I think that that's an interesting thing. That's a fun thing to go on. It is an enjoyable ride to figure out why Santa Claus was taken, to figure out who took him, what the motivation is there, and to watch all of the hijinks and fight scenes and shenanigans that happen with two of the bigger action stars of today trying to hunt down Santa Claus. I also thought that J.K. Simmons was a great Santa Claus. Now, he's not in this movie a lot. He's predominantly in the first act because he's missing the entire film, and then you get him again in the third act, obviously, but he's a very different take on Santa Claus. He's a more buff Santa. He's somebody that's got this youthful energy to him. So his performance is fun. His interaction with The Rock is very fun. There's a segment towards the end of the film where they actually show like the mechanics of how this Santa Claus gets Christmas Eve done, how he's able to visit all the different houses and get all the different presents in and slip out without being seen. It was a very fun sequence. It was a different way to visualize that very fantastical, magical scenario that we've seen variations of before in things like The Santa Claus with Tim Allen. I liked the more blockbuster approach that we got with this one. That was a fun sequence. I also thought the movie did surprisingly well at kind of building out this world and building out the lore of Santa Claus, as well as even potentially other holiday figures. We haven't really got into the Easter Bunny or the Tooth Fairy or anything in this movie, but I could see like spin-offs or other movies kind of living within this same world and actually doing pretty decent. They start getting into the Christmas Witch, they get into Krampus, and even the lore of how Santa Claus decided to have the naughty and the nice list, and even the way that they're repurposing the term of elf to not mean a literal elf, but as a acronym for like this Secret Service agents basically for Santa Claus. It was creative to me. I thought that it was fun and it was somewhat refreshing. And finally, I think this is a very rewatchable Christmas film. There's basically two categories of good Christmas movies for me. We don't have to talk about the bad ones. There's plenty of those. But with the good Christmas films, there's the category of the annual must rewatches. Those are the Home Alones, the Christmas Vacations, the Die Hards, and I don't want to hear any shit in the comment section about Die Hard not being a Christmas movie. And then you have all of the others, which are movies that you don't necessarily have to rewatch every year, but usually one or two of them, maybe even three of them, work their way into December somehow because they're good enough. And I think Red One fits very comfortably into this group. Not a must-watch Christmas classic, not something that I can see me and my family watching every single December, but every couple of years, we'll probably throw it on into whatever streaming service it ends up on and have a good enough time revisiting it. Moving on to the mixed. I think that this movie does a pretty good job at having some full CG effect animals, creatures, characters, environments especially, while also mixing in a decent amount of practical stuff. It felt like Krampus especially was a fully prosthetic, rubber suit, and it looked very convincing. The mixed side of it is that the fact that this movie cost like $250,000. And when you see a budget like that, you expect the movie to look immaculate. And I would not say that this does. I think it looks fine. I think if you didn't know what the budget of the movie was, or if it was reported to be significantly lower, we wouldn't really bitch too much. So as a movie that's intended for families, that's meant to be a silly, fun, turn your brain off type of an experience, I think that they do a decent enough job with what they're doing. I just want to know where the fuck all that money went. And I think a lot of it went to the stars of this movie, which is yet another mixed aspect for me. I love Chris Evans. I used to really love The Rock. I've kind of fallen out of love with him, but I still am entertained by The Rock. But the problem with both of them in this movie specifically is that they are both doing like the most stock Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Chris Evans performance that you could give. Every role that The Rock takes at this point is the same exact character. It's the same exact inflections, the same attitude. It's the same bag of tricks. It works better for some characters than others, but in general, it's a performance, it's a style out of The Rock that I'm just beyond burnt out on, and I think a lot of us are. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the next project he has coming out is this A24 drama directed by one of the Safdie brothers, where he's going to be potentially going for like an Oscar-type role. And I'm excited for that. I'm excited to not only see what that movie is going to be, but I'm excited to see The Rock finally get back out of his comfort zone. Because when he first started acting, I thought he was a really exciting presence. I loved The Rundown. I really enjoyed, despite the varying quality of those movies, seeing him do different things like Driver and Doom and Snitch and Walking Tall. And it seems like ever since he got into the Fast and the Furious franchise, he's just been in that type of movie. It's like absolute blockbuster schlock tunnel vision. It's Fast and Furious sequels, it's Jungle Cruise, it's Red One. And I think the people, The Rock's fans, and even those that aren't his fans, have been very clear that we just don't want any more of that, at least not for a while. So hopefully that changes soon, but when you look at his performance and his character in Red One, you could literally switch him out with his character from Jumanji or from any of the other movies that he's done, and there's not a whole lot that's different there. Is he fine in the movie? Is he funny? Is he entertaining? Does he work well with Chris Evans? Yes. So I think he does a very suitable, good job with what this movie requires. As a fan, though, I just want to see more from him. I want to see something different. And then with Chris Evans, outside of Captain America, he plays pretty much the same role every single time when he's in a movie that has more than like $100,000 budget. You know, you see him do some cool, interesting things like the Iceman or Puncture every once in a while, but everything that he did before he got into the Marvel Cinematic Universe was like this snarky, smartass, cocky Boston guy.
I'm not gonna like you. I can tell right away. Out of everyone here, I like you the least.
And that's basically everything that he has done since Endgame. And that is the type of character you have here. He's the snarky guy that has little quips and doesn't really care. And I'm on the naughty list. Who cares about that? Is he good at doing it? Yes. Same like The Rock. There's a reason why he gets those types of roles so often, because he is good at them. But as a Chris Evans fan, I want something else. I'm tired of eating the same meal every time I go to the Chris Evans restaurant. And then the last thing that I'll talk about is just movies of this type. $200+ million blockbuster, schlocky type vibe that feels like it was made for a streaming service and probably was intended to be a streaming service film until the budget inflated so badly, with the same batch of actors thrown into it. This has become something that's been a big annoyance for movie fans, and even those of us, like the YouTubers and critics that are expected to watch all of these and cover them for a couple of years now. You know, ever since COVID, there's been a big spike in big budget streaming service films that star Chris Evans or star The Rock or star Ryan Reynolds. And they all unfortunately kind of operate in that 2.5 to 3.5 star ball game. I've never really seen any of them that get overwhelming praise from anybody, nor are they ever really treated to be a dumpster fire. They're just kind of dispensable entertainment. They're meant to catch your attention on a streaming service where you click play and there's enough going on that you don't click off of it. It's a proven fact at this point. It is reported out the wazoo that all of these streaming services, the ones that succeed anyway, they're optimizing their movies for that type of experience, not to give you this grand experience of a film that you're going to walk away raving about and become one of your favorites, not to be a movie that's this trash dumpster fire, even though some of them end up being that way. They aim for that 3-star experience, which is just to have you click and not click off. That is the two goals. And this one being in theaters obviously is a bit of an anomaly with that, but eventually it's going to have its biggest viewership on a streaming service, especially if it comes out before Christmas. And while that practice I can't stand, I think it's bad for movies. I think it does nothing but dilute the magic of movies, and it just fills everybody with these experiences that are just unremarkable, and so they just don't have the desire to really go out to the theaters or watch many other films because there's so many movies being made nowadays, and their attention is being drawn to the ones that aren't as worth their time as some others that unfortunately go to theaters and die a quick death. But for a family Christmas film, I'm not as harsh on a movie aiming for that as I am some others. There's a ton of holiday films out there, usually at least one a year, that goes for that type of experience. Just this perfectly fine, dispensable 90 minutes, 2 hours of a goofy good time to have with the kids one night. And I think that this is the type of movie that will suit very fine for that type of experience. As I said, I can see my family rewatching this every couple of years. This is the type of movie that if I watched it as a kid, I probably would have loved. I'm a massive fan of Jingle All the Way. I don't know if I would have loved that movie if I saw it as an adult, but as a kid, seeing Arnold Schwarzenegger do all these crazy Christmas hijinks, I love that movie. That is in that category of yearly rewatches for me. And there's going to be a lot of kids, I think, that watch this movie, that love The Rock, that love Captain America, that are going to have a really good time with this and are going to watch it 2 or 3 times in December and every single year since then. I think that it's just one of those types of films where a lot of us older people, a lot of us older fans are not necessarily the target audience. Our kids are. And I think that's okay. You know, we can acknowledge its issues, and I'm acknowledging plenty of them, still have yet to get into many of them, but a movie like this, I think, operates perfectly fine and is not offensive to me on any level to be that 3.5-star experience that's just meant to have a decent time, a good time with your kids in December. And again, I think if we didn't know the budget, or if the budget wasn't so ridiculously inflated, I don't think nearly as many of us would be as offended with this movie, and nearly as many of the negative reviews that I have seen would be as harsh on this film. It's just the fact that Hollywood is we're supposed to be in a bad state where Hollywood is on the rocks. And, the future of the movie industry is in peril. And yet they're spending $250 million on a movie like this. That's certainly stupid. There's a lot of questions that I have in regards to the financial decisions that Hollywood makes if they're supposed to be in some sort of peril. They seem like they're their own worst enemies sometimes. But all of that aside, I think the movie is perfectly fine for what it's aiming to be. Now moving on to the negatives. Despite everything that I just said about what this movie is aiming to be, and it's aiming to be for kids and families, I do think to an extent the movie has a little bit of an identity crisis because it's got more of like a teenage sense of humor to it. There's a little bit of language in there, which of course has never bothered me. I've never been super strict on language with my kids, but a lot of people are. So this is not a movie that I think is really aiming towards the younger kids that the tone of this movie appeals more to, while at the same time, it's too goofy and too silly to completely appeal to the teenagers and the adults that some of the humor is geared towards. So I think that if the movie does have a significant issue, that's it. It's that it's trying to kind of please everybody, and I think there's a good shot that in doing that, they're going to please very few people because it's too adult for the kids and too dumb for everybody that's older than kids. I also didn't think that the villain was all that interesting by the end of it. You have, is it Kiernan Shipka, who played Sabrina? She was in Totally Killer that I was a big fan of. She is in this film as the main villain here. And while I was initially really intrigued because of that lore building that I was talking about earlier, it just felt like once her motivation was revealed, she was kind of just this background character for most of the film. So I think they could have done something a lot more interesting. It's a bit of a problem when you have Krampus in here, who's not a villain in the film, but he's way more interesting than the actual villain. They could have worked on that a little bit more. And my final negative is that there's this plot element going on between Chris Evans and his estranged son in the film that it's a pretty cliche family element for many Christmas films, bringing families together. And so it's a familiar element that I felt like they didn't put quite enough juice into it. By the end of it, it's supposed to be this very emotional piece of the story. It's supposed to have a lot of a feeling of resolution in there and give you the warm and fuzzies. And I just feel like we didn't get enough focus on Chris Evans' turmoil regarding his estranged relationship with his son, getting into his son's relationship with Chris Evans. We're pretty much just told by his mom all the things that he wishes he could have with his father. So it's an element that's fine, but if they had really built that out a bit more, it could have brought a nice little heartbeat to such a silly movie that would have really brought the Christmas cheer, the Christmas traditions, the Christmas themes a lot more into the forefront by the third act than what they're able to pull off here. Overall, guys, I think this movie was fine. Now, fine is not a ringing endorsement, but at the same time, I don't think this is like one of the worst movies ever. I don't think this is one of the worst movies of the year. I've seen this thing just getting raked over the coals, and I just don't think that's completely fair. This is a perfectly suitable family film that I don't necessarily think you need to rush out to the theaters to see. You can wait until, I think it's coming to Amazon, and check it out with your family there. But I think when you do, if you sit down with your wife and your kids or your nephews or your brothers and sisters or whoever you're watching it with, I think it's a good enough time for a fun little December family film. I really do. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, click over here for all of my 2024 new release reviews and up here for a holiday horror tier list I did last year. Please like, share, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. Be sure to check out Factor Meals down in the video description below. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.